Roadless areas constitute what's left of the real world. They constitute our last chance to really protect a significant portion of the American landscape as it's always been. They represent really everything that's good about our society. They represent unspoiled wilderness, big vistas, clean air, clean water, healthy wildlife habitat, healthy wildlife populations. And really, the single most important thing that we as a society can do right now to move in the direction of protecting native species and native habitats is to protect our public land roadless areas, especially those in our national forest system. And in that sense, the new administration's Roadless Area Initiative represents a fantastic opportunity to take a big step towards getting the job done right.
What the Forest Service is doing right now, and throughout this, we'll be collecting public comments, determining the overriding ecological values and the social values of these remaining roadless lands. That's about 60 million acres in total, and determining a way that they will be managed into the future.
Good evening. My name is Marsha Hogan, and I'm the moderator of tonight's meeting. Thank you for coming. This meeting is one of the first of many meetings that are being held across the country, some national meetings and local meetings that will take place the next couple months to talk about the future management of roadless areas on the national forest and the national grasslands.
Thank you for this process. Thanks for letting us have a voice. It's taken us a long time to get to this point that we are actually talking about roadless areas. This is a huge step forward for us in this debate.
We're here tonight to talk about managing roadless areas on our national forests. It's a bit odd to describe an area by what it is not. In this case, an area without roads. I think that describing our unprotected wildland areas this way tells us a great deal about what we have lost. Almost 95% of this country that was entirely roadless 300 years ago is now roaded. We have enough roads and enough motorized access.
Roads are one of the most obvious ways in which humans put their stamp on the rest of the world. I always look out the window on airplane flights, and it's shocking to me how you can barely fly for a minute or two without seeing a road. And you know that where there's a road, there's cars, there's soil erosion, there's air pollution, and if you're a grizzly bear, or if you're a marbled murrelet, or if you are any of a number of species whose habitat has already been carved into tiny pieces, it's at 1 or 5% of what it used to be, the simple presence of one road, although it seems innocuous by human standards when we're used to living in cities with many of them, even one road is enough to alter the character of that forest.
National forests are part of our legacy. It's what we leave for our children. And more than half of these national forests have already been hammered. They've been hit hard by logging, by oil and gas development, by mining. What remains is about 60 million acres of undeveloped wild pockets of national forest land.
We've been wrestling with the issue of what to do with these roadless areas for a long period of time. But as long as the Forest Service was focused on getting out the cut, which has been its focus since the Second World War, the Forest Service was very little interested in either wilderness or protecting roadless areas.
I had an experience up close and personal with a major timber program, major road program, and trying to make the management of aquatic resources compatible with those programs for nearly 20 years. And from my standpoint, I don't think it can work. Wherever you have a major timber program and road program, you have a fragmented landscape, degraded watersheds, degraded water quality, and marginal fish and wildlife habitats.
The road system that's been put in place over the last half century is so extensive that they can't afford to maintain the roads they have. They face an enormous problem. They need to be closing roads, reclaiming them so that they're stabilized in terms of erosion, and they simply can't afford to be adding to that costly inventory.
Why would we then want to put more roads in that we can't maintain in order to provide losing logging revenue. It doesn't make any sense at all. But it makes a lot of sense to maintain these areas as fairly pristine forested areas so that the economy gets the benefit of the visitors to those forested areas.
And if indeed the Roadless Area Initiative does really protect these areas, and that still remains to be seen what level of protection these areas are going to get, it really does represent a complete about-face as far as the Forest Service's policy towards our remaining unprotected wilderness is concerned.
Parts of the forest that are wild now, if we keep them wild, and this stream will keep running clear and keep running cold and be a good place for fishing. And I'd like to see that. And I'd like for my kids to see that.
Well, I love being in the forest, and I don't like being in major cities or towns because of all the stinky cars. I just love being in natural places and not with all those tall buildings and everybody walking around. I just like being outdoors where all the wildlife can just come up. You can look at all the plants, the trees, and everything.
We've enjoyed the wilderness all of our lives, and we want it to still be here for our kids and for their kids and for their kids. So it's real important.
It's so nice to just get away from it all and into these woods or into any natural place and just sit down and look around you and notice how beautiful everything is. It's so wonderful to get away from everything else.
I mean, if you're out in the middle of the woods, you really realize how silly most of your problems are. And it's good to have some place that you can go and put perspective on things.
There's something that takes you deep within yourself, when you don't hear a car. You start realizing that there's more than what we see in every day. We're running around the city all day, and really we don't stop and look at the trees and smell the roses. You can do that. You can do that in this kind of places, where there's no roads. To me, it's a very spiritual. It's like going to church in many ways.
There needs to be places where we can step back from the assumption that everything was created for us. The idea of roadless areas, wild forests, is that there be areas that aren't focused on our economic interests, but are there to protect the diversity of God's creation.
One of the most significant threats is the rising pressure from the off-road vehicle community, who feel that they're being robbed of opportunities to recreate on national forest lands.
There's no chance that motorized users are ever going to be locked out of vast areas of public lands. We have 400,000, actually in excess of 400,000 road miles existing today just in our national forest system. These are roads that are open to vehicular use. Most of them are constructed roads that were built with bulldozers across previous wild habitats.
Well, there's a lot of kinds of access in the national forest. People want to hike, people want to take their canoes and kayaks down the rivers. All of that's access. Access is not just about driving over every square mile of forest in your Jeep or your dirt bike. So we are protecting access. Access is about being able to use the forest and enjoy the many values that it has to offer.
Well, it's like in California. They have those gigantic trees that are so huge, and they have that one that you can drive a car through.
Oh, lovely.
And everyone says, that's so cool. There's a tree so big that you can drive a car through it. And I say, yeah, but wouldn't it be cooler if you couldn't drive a car through it?
What we're asking for is for some lands to be set aside for quietness, for a place for us to recreate, to re-find our soul, for a place for refuge for wildlife that doesn't have any choices, can't go anywhere else because it's been exterminated from the land surrounding. We're asking for the last remnant bits, and it's not too much to ask for the off-road vehicle community to set aside and leave a last few places that are silent of motors.
There are so few places that are left, these wild places, that as the United States approaches the bicentennial of Lewis and Clark, we have a choice. We can eulogize what's been lost and has continued to be lost, or we can take steps to protect these wild places that are wild today as they were wild at the time of Lewis and Clark.
Well, I'm speaking representing Captain William Clark this evening. I've recently been re-exploring the mountains, and I'm surprised to find so many roads and so many mountains, but I have become confused. It seemed these roads were going somewhere, but I'm reconciled now to the fact that these roads go nowhere. Nowhere. I frankly don't see the practical and utilitarian value in building more roads in our wild forests if this development threatens our clean drinking water, wildlife habitat, and the little that's left of the pristine West that Lewis and I so much admired. So I urge you to be rational and practical and to cease building roads on all roadless areas. That's all.
If everybody in this room who is interested in supporting roadless areas might just stand up so that we could see how many people here support that. Thank you very much.
Regardless of how the Roadless Area Initiative really turns out, it's going to be up to people, to the grassroots, to make sure that anything good that comes out of this sticks. There's going to be a lot of pressure from extractive industry and from motorized interests to undo any good that comes out of this, and it's going to be up to the people who care about our remaining public wildlands to make as much noise and to get involved in the process and to really let our leaders know that the American people want these priceless wildlands protected.
1,000 years ago, here in this country, it was all wilderness. And now we're looking at 1% to 2% of bits and pieces, pockets of wild places, from Florida to Washington State, all across the country, little tiny pockets that remind us of who we are and where we came from. And I think that we're going to lose this opportunity in the next several decades by the sheer pressure, whether it's from off-road vehicle use, oil and gas, logging and roading, or other kinds of developments that are not even dreamt of yet. We're going to lose that opportunity unless we make a permanent choice.
So the Forest Service should look at a proposal that manages lands at least down to 1,000 acres and larger. And secondly, there's a possibility that certain national forests may be kept out of the process completely. And one of the major areas is the Tongass National Forest in Alaska.
The Tongass is at risk of being left out of the president's policy. And I think that the only way that can be changed is to carry this message to the entire nation that these wild places in Alaska are under siege, and the only people who can protect these places are the citizens of the United States.
We need full protection of roadless areas. We need roadless areas protected from road building, from logging, from resource extraction of any kind, and from all sorts of motorized use. Only full protection of these roadless areas is really going to do the job in protecting native species and native habitats. And that's what the American people and that's what these wildlands deserve.
I want to be able to come hiking in a roadless area when I'm 90 years old with my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren.